Chapter 13. The group made some progress throughout the day, although they hadn't covered a lot of ground. They were able to find food and water, which wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going for a few more days. They knew they had to keep moving and not become complacent, as they figured soldiers were on their trail, hunting them down. Due to recent events, everyone was a little on edge, feeling like prey and constantly looking over their shoulders. If there were soldiers and strange men in the woods, there could be others. These groups were known to exist, nomadic tribes left over from the war, displaced by automation or dissenters unwilling to partake in regular society and abide by civilized rules. They were considered to be armed and dangerous, and it was advised to exercise extreme caution if one was to encounter such groups or individuals. Sitting around a crackling fire, everyone was sharing stories from their past and getting along well. In the distance, some group members heard a noise. "You heard that too?" Cheryl asked, looking at Lauren, who had turned her head at the same time. "Yeah, it sounded like it was coming from behind us," Lauren replied. "Probably just the fire echoing throughout the forest." The professor posited a theory. "Your mind will play tricks on you out here if you let it." "Maybe it's Dane and Allie," Lauren suggested. "Dane? Allie?" "Hey, keep your voice down," the professor said. "We don't know who's out there. We wouldn't want to notify any unwanted visitors of our presence." "Professor, with all due respect," Lauren said, "we have a giant fire and we've been talking loudly for the past few hours. If anything is out there, they already know we're here." When they didn't get a response, several people became tense and unnerved. Train stood up with a torch and instructed everyone to remain calm. "Be careful, Train," Lauren said. Before Train even took one step, 10 dark figures emerged from the woods. Unsure who these people were and what they wanted, Train was on guard, ready to defend his tribe. "Who are you people?" he demanded in his most authoritative tone. As a towering figure holding a flaming stick, Train was surely intimidating to anyone foolish enough to oppose him. "We come in peace," a voice spoke, stepping into the light. "We were with you all on the bus." The group around the campfire stood up and sized up the newcomers. Within a few seconds, they scanned their faces and recognized a few of them. "I recognize them," Cheryl said. "Yeah, they're good," Lynn confirmed. "What are you people doing here in the middle of the night?" Train asked, still a bit defensive. "We had to move camp. The soldiers aren't far behind. They already killed a dozen of us already. We had to keep moving." "So you led them here?" Train said. "We're exhausted and need a place to rest. We saw the smoke from your fire and figured it was you guys. Would it be okay if we hunkered down here for the night? In the morning, if you all decide to go your separate way, that's fine." The Dark Circle squad exchanged looks of reassurance to each other and came to an unspoken consensus. "We don't have much to offer," Cheryl said, "but you're welcome to stay with us. The more the merrier." "Perfect. Thank you. We have some food if you guys are hungry. We found a pretty large berry bush earlier this morning and took whatever we could carry. We've been eating berries all day and would be happy to share with you as a peace offering." "That would be great," Cheryl said. "Thank you. Please have a seat around the fire. Get warm." Everyone got up and helped themselves to a handful of delicious blueberries. It was totally unexpected and an indescribably satisfying way to end the evening. "What's your name?" Cheryl asked. "My name is Emily," a young, fresh-faced girl said. She was very pregnant, which immediately drew sympathy from everyone. Several people rushed over to assist her. You poor thing, you must be in so much pain, Lynn said. Please, come sit by the fire and get warm. Everyone began to mingle and introduce themselves. They all gathered around the fire and exchanged stories and plans with one another. Not surprisingly, the new group had reached an agreement amongst themselves to run and hide for as long as possible. But since they didn't have Mr. Camouflage in their group, they weren't even aware who their enemy was. You said soldiers killed some of your people? Mr. Camouflage asked. Yes. All those who remained on the bus are now dead, Emily stated. You saw it happen? Some of us were fortunate enough to get away, but we were still close enough to see it. What did the soldiers look like? Mr. Camouflage asked. They were covered from head to toe in black combat gear. Several of them came into the woods looking for us. The slowest members of our group. Emily paused, unable to finish. She started to cry, and the rest of her group consoled her. A heartfelt silence fell over the large group, as everyone was reminded of the weight of the situation. Mr. Camouflage filled the others in on what he had told his Dark Circle cohorts, and then informed them of their plan to take down the Shadow. Understandably, the news came as a bit of a shock to the newbies, and many of them had questions. You mentioned you were part of the Shadow, Emily said. How did you get involved? It was right when the war was coming to an end. I was recruited by some fellow Shadow members, he began. As a hacker, I look for vulnerabilities in software and databases, and exploit them. It's sort of a hobby of mine. Back then, there was a rogue group on the dark web, calling themselves the Shadow. They appeared on forums and in some covert chat rooms, only accessible to those capable of bypassing the extensive security protocols. I gained access through a flaw in their security and posed as one of their members. I had been posing under the alias Raven Storm for months, gathering information. Little did I know, they knew I was an imposter the entire time, and were leading me down a path. I thought I was making progress, but I later learned they were just trapdoors, waiting for me to fall down. They actually designed these flaws as a recruiting mechanism. If you're capable enough to access these highly restricted areas, then you have proven yourself to be a worthy candidate for their team. After my presence became exposed, they offered me a job. I accepted, even though I had never met any of them and wasn't really sure what they did. All of our identities remained anonymous, and I was given the name Mr. Camouflage. I received small assignments and payments once those tasks were complete. Slowly, over time, I gained their trust and would take on bigger assignments with higher security clearance. As it turned out, we were creating a new system of government that was completely digital. We controlled every aspect of society, including the money, the justice system, policy, defense, you name it. It was all coming from us. You could say that I was complicit in building a tyrannical system, but I was never given the full picture. I was instructed to work on one part, but remained ignorant of the full scope of what I was working on, or what impact it would have on society. Later, I learned more about some of the strict laws governing the citizens, and how many people's rights were being violated. I wanted to speak out about it, but I didn't build relationships with those other Shadow members. It wasn't like we all hung out on the weekends or met in private clubs to discuss our plans. So I didn't really know who I could trust. So what did you do? Someone asked.
I figured I was anonymous, so anything I did couldn't be traced back to me. I mean, I guess I was a little naive to think that, but I wanted to set a plan in motion that would ultimately disrupt their agenda, or at least make things a little harder for them.
You sabotaged them?
I tried. I was on the inside, so I thought I could really do some damage. I released a virus that I thought was nearly impossible to defend against. It was designed to chew through their code and destroy them from within.
What happened?
The virus was quarantined in a matter of seconds, and the code was restored. I claimed it wasn't me, and continued to work as usual. But they knew what I was up to. The next day, I took an automated taxi across town, and the car started driving recklessly. It was as if it had a mind of its own. Or it had been hacked. It began to accelerate and swerve erratically. I was being knocked around in the back seat.
That must have been traumatizing for you.
Eventually, the car slammed into a pole, nearly splitting in two, and I was knocked unconscious. I was lucky to be alive. When I came to, I couldn't feel my legs. I had sustained a severe spinal injury that rendered me paralyzed. I also suffered third-degree burns over most of my body, had several broken bones, and fractured my skull. I knew my wounds and broken bones would heal, but I lost the use of my legs and was told I would never walk again.
I'm so sorry to hear that,
Emily said.
Several others comforted Mr. Camouflage.
As I lay in the hospital recovering, I hadn't logged into my computer in weeks. When I finally had access to a computer, none of my passwords worked. Not just for my shadow accounts, but for all my accounts. It was as if any digital footprint of my identity had been completely erased from history. I didn't exist.
That's so terrifying,
Lauren said. As you all know, we live in such a digital world. I couldn't really do anything. I had no money and no social currency whatsoever.
Didn't you have family or friends you could call or stay with?
Lauren asked. Sadly, no. The life of a hacker doesn't really lend itself to being all that social. Anyone who I could call on as my friend only existed in the digital world.
So what did you do?
I stayed at the hospital, where they continued to rehabilitate me and feed me, give me a place to stay. One day, when I went out, I was abruptly taken against my will and put in a van, just as you have all experienced. When I awoke, I found myself in the back of a bus, being led to a slaughterhouse.
You have us now, Cheryl said.
We are your friends.
Yeah, Lauren chimed in. We look after each other.